The sun bled across the horizon of Harmony Creek, painting the dust-choked sky in hues of orange and bruised purple. It was a town that clung to the edge of the known world, a final outpost of rough-hewn timber and rougher men before the land stretched out into vast, untamed territories. At the heart of it all was the Thirsty Devil Saloon, its batwing doors swinging open to spill yellow light and the raucous laughter of cattle drivers onto the street. Leaning against a support pillar, half shrouded in the deepening twilight, was a native man. His clothes were a collage of worn leather and tattered cloth, and an empty whiskey bottle lay on its side near his moccasined feet. He swayed, a lone, pathetic figure lost in a drunken haze. Inside, Silas, a cowboy with a sun-scorched face and a cruel twist to his lips, pointed a thumb toward the door. "Look at that," he sneered to his companions, his voice loud enough to carry. The noble savage, conquered by a bottle of cheap rye. His friends guffawed, the sound sharp and ugly. They spilled out onto the porch, their boots thudding on the warped planks. They circled the man, their shadows stretching long and menacing in the fading light. "Hey, Chief," one of them slurred, jabbing a finger at the man's chest. "Lost your way to the reservation." The native man didn't respond. His head was bowed, his long black hair obscuring his face. He simply stood there, absorbing their taunts like a stone in a river, his silence only fueling their contempt. Silas snatched the empty bottle from the ground, holding it up. "This is your new tribe's totem, eh?" He laughed again and tossed the bottle into the street where it shattered, the sound echoing briefly before being swallowed by the immense quiet of the coming night. The final echo of Silas's laughter faded into the cold night, leaving only the mournful creak of the Thirsty Devil's sign swinging in the breeze. For another long moment, the man they had dismissed as a drunk remained slumped against the wall, a forgotten heap in the encroaching darkness. Then, with a control that defied his previous appearance, he slowly lifted his head. The change was profound and immediate. The vacant, whiskey-soaked haze in his eyes vanished, replaced by a gaze as sharp and clear as fractured obsidian. His spine straightened, the feigned weakness falling away like a shed skin, revealing the powerful frame of a warrior beneath the tattered clothes. He rose in one fluid, silent motion, his moccasins making no sound on the dusty ground. His eyes swept across Harmony Creek, not with a drunkard's unfocused stare, but with the keen assessment of a general surveying a battlefield. He absorbed every detail, the two guards making their lazy rounds, the wide, dark gaps between their patrols, the boisterous, unguarded noise spilling from the saloon, a clear sign of undisciplined overconfidence. They had shown him their character, arrogant, cruel, and utterly blind to any threat they didn't already understand. They saw a broken man because that is all they were capable of seeing. Slipping into the deep shadows of the alley between the saloon and the blacksmith's, he moved with the grace of a phantom. He knelt beside a pile of discarded barrels, his hand finding a loose stone in the foundation. From the small hollow beneath, he retrieved a weathered leather pouch. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. His mission was complete. He had come to measure the heart of this town and had found it hollow and rotten. Standing, he looked out towards the dark, silent bluffs that loomed over the valley. The time for observation was over. Judgment would arrive with the dawn. The first rays of dawn painted the dusty main street of Harmony Creek in soft hues of orange and pink. The air was cool and still, broken only by the crow of a distant rooster and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. A few early risers began their daily chores, believing it to be a morning like any other. The deceptive peace was shattered not by a gunshot, but by a sound far more unnerving, the measured, rhythmic beat of dozens of hooves on hard-packed earth. Heads turned. From the west end of town, a column of riders emerged. They were not a chaotic raiding party, but a disciplined force, moving with a solemn purpose. At their head, on a powerful gray Appaloosa, was the man from the saloon. He was transformed. The shabby, stained clothes were gone, replaced by dignified leather and beadwork that spoke of status. He sat tall and straight, his face a mask of resolute calm, his eyes scanning the town with an intensity that made stomachs clench. Silas and two of his friends stumbled out of the Thirsty Devil, their faces puffy from sleep and cheap whiskey. Their morning banter died on their lips as they saw the procession. Recognition dawned, followed swiftly by disbelief, then a cold, creeping dread. The drunken fool they had ridiculed was now the leader of this intimidating assembly. The man raised a hand, and his warriors halted in perfect, silent unison in the center of town. The sudden quiet was deafening. Every window now framed a pale, anxious face. The man's gaze swept over the stunned onlookers before landing squarely on Silas, pinning him in place. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely inverted. The hunter had become the prey. The silence stretched thin, a fragile thread about to snap under the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. Sheriff Miller, a man whose authority had never been so thoroughly challenged, felt a cold sweat trace a path down his spine. The man on the black horse raised a hand, not in threat, but to command attention he already held completely. His voice, when it came, was not a shout but a low, resonant rumble that carried across the dusty street, cutting through the morning chill. "I am Kalen of the Stone River people," he declared, his gaze locking onto Sheriff Miller, then sweeping over the terrified faces in the crowd before finally settling on Silas, who seemed to shrink under its intensity. "This town, Harmony Creek, stands on land stolen from my ancestors. You have drank from our springs, and now you poison them with your careless greed. You have dug your metal into our sacred grounds." He pointed a stern finger directly at Silas. "This man led others to defile the burial site of our elders, seeking the yellow rock you value more than honor." A murmur of fear and recognition rippled through the townsfolk. They knew of Silas's prospecting ventures, but few understood the line he had crossed. "We are not here for war," Kalen continued, his voice hardening. "We are here for justice. The law of our people demands a price for such desecration. Surrender this man to us." Sheriff Miller swallowed hard, his hand hovering near his pistol, a futile gesture he knew it was. "Now hold on," he started, trying to inject authority into his trembling voice. "This is my town. We have our own laws." Kalen's expression remained unchanged, a mask of cold resolve. "Your laws end where our sacred lands begin. You have until the sun is high in the sky. Deliver him, or we will claim our justice from the ashes of this town." The air in Harmony Creek grew thick and suffocating, each tick of the general store's clock a hammer blow against the town's fragile composure. Kalen's ultimatum hung over them like a hangman's noose. The crowd, once a unified front of frightened observers, fractured into panicked whispers and heated arguments. "He's a murderer," a woman shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Silas. "He brought this upon us. Give him to them." Silas, his face pale and slick with sweat, recoiled. His bravado from the saloon had evaporated, replaced by raw animal fear. "You can't," he stammered, his eyes darting to his friends. "We can't let them tell us what to do. We fight." But his cronies, who had laughed alongside him the night before, now avoided his gaze. They shuffled their feet, their loyalty dissolving under the silent, unwavering stare of 100 warriors. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol not as a threat, but as a comforting weight. "Hold on now," he said, his voice a low rumble attempting to quell the rising hysteria. He looked from the terrified Silas to the resolute Kalen. "There has to be another way, a trial by our laws." "Your laws do not apply to our dead," Kalen interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise with chilling clarity. "His actions violated our most sacred traditions. Our justice will be served. The sun climbs higher, Sheriff. Your town's fate is in your hands, not mine." The finality in Kalen's tone silenced the crowd. All eyes turned to Sheriff Miller, who now stood between the will of his people and the cold promise of annihilation. His duty was to protect every citizen, but the survival of all now depended on the sacrifice of one. The wind carried a chill that had nothing to do with the approaching dusk. It whispered through the Cottonwood Grove, a sacred place where generations of the Stone River people had laid their ancestors to rest. It was here that Alara, Her hands stained with the berry juice she'd been gathering first saw the disturbed earth. Her steps faltered. This ground was inviolate, a pact of silence and respect between the living and the dead. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she drew closer. The horror was worse than she could have imagined. Shallow graves, meant to be protected by stone cairns, were clawed open. The bones of her ancestors lay exposed to the cold air, their sacred burial wrappings torn and cast aside like refuse. A glint of metal caught her eye, a silver button from a settler's coat, lying near a deep boot print that was not their own. She choked back a sob and ran, her feet flying over the uneven ground, her voice a raw cry that sliced through the canyon's quiet. Kalen was the first to reach her, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her terror. He listened, his dark eyes hardening with each word. He walked to the burial site, his movements deliberate, his jaw set like granite. He knelt, not in rage, but in a profound, cold sorrow that quickly burned into resolve. He saw the tracks, the discarded cigar, the blatant disrespect. This was not just theft, it was a violation meant to shatter their spirit. He stood, his gaze fixed on the distant, hazy lights of Harmony Creek. "They mistake our peace for weakness," he said, his voice low and resonant. "I will walk among them. I will learn their faces, their numbers, and I will find the man who led this desecration. He will answer to the spirits he has insulted." The midday sun beat down on Harmony Creek, casting sharp, unforgiving shadows. The air was thick with a silence that felt heavier than any sound. As the deadline arrived, the doors of the Thirsty Devil Saloon creaked open. Sheriff Miller stepped out, his face etched with exhaustion and grim acceptance. He walked slowly into the center of the street, his hands held open and away from his gun, a clear signal of surrender. "The town has made its choice," Miller announced, his voice carrying in the tense quiet. On his cue, two burly townsmen emerged from an alley, dragging a struggling Silas between them. His bravado was gone, replaced by a raw, animalistic fear. They shoved him forward, and he stumbled, falling into the dust at the feet of Kalen's horse. The once proud cowboy who had led the mockery now groveled, his pleas for mercy lost in choked sobs. Kalen dismounted, his movements deliberate and commanding. He ignored Silas, instead fixing his gaze on the frightened faces of the townspeople peering from doorways. "My people do not seek vengeance," Kalen's voice boomed, clear and resonant. "We demand justice. His death would be an easy end. He will not die." He motioned to two of his warriors, who moved forward to bind Silas's hands. "He will learn the meaning of respect by rebuilding what he destroyed. He will repay his debt to our ancestors with the sweat of his labor, not the spilling of his blood." With Silas secured and pulled to his feet, Kalen mounted his horse again. He looked over the humbled town one last time. "Remember this day. This land is sacred, and it does not forget. Live on it with honor, or you will answer for it." Without another word, Kalen and his warriors turned and rode eastward, their departure as swift and silent as their arrival. Harmony Creek was left standing, saved from annihilation but forever changed. The arrogant laughter of the saloon was gone, replaced by the profound, sobering silence of a lesson brutally learned.